Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for the Rise of Modern Applications. This session will be recorded and we'll send a link to this recording after the event concludes. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenter today, Michael Quill. Michael?
Thanks, Jenna. Good morning, good afternoon, all. My name is Michael Quill. I am Catapult's Director for Azure Management Services. And that is our ongoing DevSecOps service we offer our customers that we've either migrated to Microsoft's cloud or they've migrated themselves and realized they need a little more help than they initially thought. So thanks for joining us today. We're certainly excited to talk to you about sort of app modernization. It's a topic that's top of mind for many of our customers today and has been, as we've sort of accelerated business transformation during the pandemic. And so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the signs it might be time to modernize. And then hopefully you'll stay on and listen to my colleague Josh Handel talk about some of the ways to actually plan for and implement that optimization. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. From a agenda perspective, we're going to talk a bit about some of the business drivers for modernization. We'll talk through what it really means to modernize, right? It's a word or an expression thrown around quite frequently. And so we'll kind of talk about what it is and the types. And then, of course, we want to talk about those sort of 5 key signs that it's time to modernize. Didn't want to give away any spoilers here, so got to stay on and listen to each 5 of those. And then finally, how do you get started? This can be daunting for many of our customers. There's so many things that can be done. You kind of get yourself in a situation where you don't know how to make that first step. And so just give you an example of how we help some of our customers through this modernization journey. So with that, you kind of just drive in. And when you think about, why an organization modernizes, it's really about sort of the business impact. People aren't modernizing their apps or their data estate simply for the latest technology or some sort of cool factor. It really is being driven by business impact. We've seen a hyper focus on ROI and sort of enabling business outcomes through the pandemic, and continue to see that for the foreseeable future around the IT landscape. And so, got to start with that business impact. One of the first things we're sort of seeing as a key driver from a business perspective is around security and an organization's risk posture. I think there's certainly numerous different controls and advanced technologies for security that are present in the cloud that sort of eclipse the traditional on-prem sort of firewall protection schema. And so a lot of organizations want to take advantage of those advanced controls and also some of the advanced capabilities, right? If you think about the way Microsoft's cloud technologies are created, right? They're based on sort of machine learning and aggregate analysis of what's happening across the cloud and not just your cloud, right? And so that is obviously an approach to security and security in depth that you can't hope to attain on-prem. And so we see that as a driver for a lot of our customers. As well as an opportunity to just more tactically, right, to eliminate some of the sort of aging or end of life hardware and platforms they have, right, that introduce opportunities for risk. And so that's obviously a big driver we're seeing for modernization. It would be remiss not to talk about cost optimization as a key driver for businesses sort of pushing in this direction of modernization. I think that the cloud model has certainly brought the notion of CapEx versus OpEx to the front, right? And what that means for organizations who are trying to run their business from a cash flow perspective. But it also, does offer an opportunity to significantly reduce sort of ongoing maintenance and operational costs for organizations, right? So if you think about moving beyond just the traditional infrastructure as a service approach to delivering services to your employees, your constituents, or customers, when you start thinking about platform solutions, there's a real opportunity to save on the cost of that solution as well as the support infrastructure that goes around it. And then finally, a term that gets thrown around an awful lot is agility, but it really is valuable in this context around how businesses are pushing to update their systems. it allows the business to be more responsive and resilient to small shocks and large, right? As well as it responds to their employees better and really helps them sort of innovate and take new capabilities into consideration. And of course, front of mind for all of us is our customers and our constituents. How we can more quickly serve them in the ways they want to be served, right? So customer expectations are changing, and so how can the business be prepared to move and meet them quickly? And so if you think about what modernization really is, it's a funny little cartoon, right? We've all been in this situation before where we're running so hard in a direction we can't stop to think about what we're doing before we're doing it. But I mean, I think in its simplest form, you can think about app modernization is really about paying down or paying off your technical debt. And technical debt really is just a fancy little term for what is the sum or the cumulative costs that you would have to rework all those technical and business decisions that you made in the course of your app development or your app service over the past, right? What would need to be reworked or recoded today if you were going to do things differently? Every app dev project and program has some sort of technical debt. We want to focus on value, and so we sometimes take liberties or cut corners around either technical choices or business decisions, right, to drive time to market. And so that is there in every app project. So that's not uncommon. But I think if you look at the importance of technical debt, either too much of it. If you look at some of the research, I think Gartner said that, through next year, through 2023, they really see leaders that manage and reduce technical debt, achieving up to 50% faster service delivery times for their business, right? So the technical debt eventually gets to a point where it's holding you back, right? It's not allowing you to take advantage of some of the new capabilities to meet some of those objectives around, agility that we talked about as one of the key business drivers or business outcomes that leads to modernization. And so you always want to kind of, as you own your app or your portfolio of apps, you want to keep that top of mind, right? To make sure that you're thinking about your technical debt and how you're addressing that with your team. An important way that you can think about that, or a key metric to help you sort of understand where you are against that technical debt, is really just a technical debt ratio. Pretty simple calculation about your debt versus the total cost to rebuild. Just sort of keeps you grounded on kind of how far behind sort of the technical debt situation you may be. And I think obviously you want to think about sort of a key guiding post as sort of if you got a technical debt greater than 1, right? It's a situation, that in the industry they call technical bankruptcy, right? Which is a very nasty sounding term, but it doesn't really denote all the value you may have received from your application during its life cycle, right? Just because you're in a situation now where you've had an app that's serviced your organization well for a long time, you may be in a technical bankruptcy situation, but that may be okay, right? Your app really may be end of life, and it might be time to rethink the way you service either your customer or the line of business with your application and kind of start over again. But I think, like many choices around modernization, and my colleague Josh is going to talk about this more, is, don't get too hung up on technical debt and your ratios, right? It is really one factor in sort of this nuanced evaluation we see many of our customers have to undertake to really assess which apps make sense to modernize and which apps, make sense to maybe retire and start new. So it's important, but it's not the only factor. And so if you think about the types of modernization we're seeing organizations undertake today, they really kind of fall into 3 buckets. The first area is really around sort of retiring hardware. This is for our customers who have some sort of compelling event, right? Perhaps it's, I have a contract with a hosting provider. It expires in 7 months and 3 days, right? I need to be out of a data center. Or I have, a bunch of aging on-prem hardware, and we strategically, the board, our CIO, have decided that, we're not in the data center business, right? And so how do we exit gracefully, but, quickly, right? There's a driver that you've got to meet. And so in this sort of modernization, we really see customers doing the absolute minimum, so that they can turn off the flashing lights in that data center, whether it's theirs or somewhere else. And so what we often see is in this scenario is, direct port really to kind of the like for like cloud technologies. You often hear this called sort of the lift and shift approach. If you can't lift and shift the infrastructure services, as an IaaS or infrastructure as a service equivalent in the cloud, you see some customers moving towards containerization as one avenue or one method to reduce sort of application rework. It certainly works. This is the way folks have done it for a long time. Obviously, containerization is fairly new, but sort of the porting like for like has been the approach to move to the cloud for quite some time. It's started to fall a little bit out of vanguard for folks, unless there is sort of that compelling event, right? So if you think about got to get out of the data center, then you're probably going to, in most cases, sort of do that lift and shift approach. The next sort of phase we see from some customers, is more of a surgical approach, right? Where they create or they determine some sort of service boundary or some way they can break up their application or portfolio of applications into subcomponents and identify what are the most impactful portions or apps, right? Which services would benefit the most from modernization, which applications, if they were modernized, would make the business more efficient, more effective, generate new revenue, sort of that sort of analysis or assessment. And so they'll go through a process of reviewing the apps, prioritizing them, and then sort of selecting piece and parts to sort of modernize as they move to the cloud. And then finally, really is sort of the greenfield approach, right? So you've got a net new app, right? And so you are lucky enough that you don't have sort of any pre-existing notions or infrastructure or code or methodologies that you're using, and so you're able to actually start afresh in kind of a cloud-first world. This is either for a net new app you're building for the organization or for your constituents, or potentially, like I talked about earlier, right, when you've kind of gotten yourself into technical bankruptcy, the app's been around, it's done its job, and it's time to really start new, right? And not many of our customers are in this scenario, but there are certainly use cases where that does make sense for one sort of app. And generally speaking, those are the sort of the compendium of the types of modernization we're seeing customers undertake today. But of course, the really exciting stuff, what are some of the key signs that we see from our customers that mean it's time to stop and think about modernizing? One of the common ones we see often in sort of mergers and acquisition scenarios, the business has passed the app by, right? So you've got a situation where the application is sort of dictating the business process and not vice versa, which for anyone who's been in sort of user-centered design or business analysis, right? That's sort of the backwards approach, right? You want the business process to drive the app and not vice versa. But we've all been there and used apps that make no sense in the current context of our business. There are parts of the app that they're there and no one knows why they're there, right? So this kind of points to an app that's been in existence for a long time and probably was too difficult to update, or you lost folks to do the updates, and so you're in a situation where you've got these vestiges in the app that no one uses anymore, and they add no value, but they're still there. And then of course in the M&A scenario, right, you're adding new businesses and your app doesn't even really support them, right? We've all sort of been in an internal app system and go to a drop down and you realize that the names of the departments are wrong, right? Or some new line of business you've acquired and have merged into your organization is not present there. And so that certainly can be a key indicator that it's time to stop and think about one of the approaches, either that surgical modernization or potentially, if it's old enough and it's outlived its usefulness, kind of that more greenfield or cloud first modernization approach. Another common situation we see for customers is some limited access to talent. There are many customers who have key business systems, built on very, very old technology, and it's obviously it's difficult to acquire quality development talent today for the modern technical stack. It's even more so for folks that are from sort of an aging technology environment, and so how do you address that, right, if you can't actually change it? In fact, we had one SLG or state and local government customer that actually implemented a process to not change their app. It was built on a mainframe, and they literally could not reboot the machine to make updates to it because they didn't know if they could turn it back on. And so they had gone through and built an entire process internally to say, that this application could not go offline, could not be rebooted. So that is clearly an indicator that it's time to look at a net new way to service the business with a different version of that application. One we see even more commonly now, I think, is really this notion that this tightly coupled or brittle application frameworks, right, where you didn't have apps that allowed you to easily make a change and not impact downstream systems or related systems, systems that rely on your app as a source of input or a source of record. And so you get into a situation where, simply making this change requires you to coordinate with, 10 other teams across the organization. You have to do all this testing, right, to make sure your regression doesn't introduce some problems in the downstream apps or dependent apps, right? And so it comes to a point where it's too costly, really, to make anything but the most essential changes, right? And so you can't make the minor modifications that really continue to add value in the app lifecycle, right? You just can only do these sort of major whole-scale changes, and so as a result, your application kind of gets mired in the past, right, and is not able to sort of continue to evolve and meet the needs of either your customers or your internal line of businesses. We had a customer that was in software and communications, and they, their core flagship sort of internal app that ran their business process, had to talk to 20 or 22 other enterprise databases. And so there was all this data flowing back and forth, and literally got to the point where it was so expensive that they just decided to abandon this and start with a sort of a net new cloud first approach. And they, we came in and we sort of did an analysis with them and a design with them, and now we're kind of going through more of an agile based approach to delivering those services in a cloud first scenario. Kind of the fourth reason to modernize we're seeing come up more and more is, customers have evolved, right? And customers are expecting more from the business today, whether that's an internal customer or your external customers. We've got customers and consumers who are certainly more tech savvy than businesses been aware of recently. People who want to communicate via mobile or text or sort of bot interactions with your company, right? And so that requires changes to apps and systems that many organizations, unless they've got more of a cloud first approach, can't really support or address, right? So that's obviously a big driver. We've got customers who want to take ownership in the process, right? So once again, whether that's an internal customer in your line of business or an external customer, they want to own where they are in the business process your app supports. They want self-service, right? They want to be able to search for things without talking to someone. That's sort of the consumer experience they know from the general internet, and they expect that to translate into sort of their business interactions as well, right? And so once again, if you don't have more of a modern approach to app development and the ability to leverage modern application design patterns, that could be a challenge. And then finally, we are in a competitive space. Catapult is with our customers. I'm sure many of the folks on this are with their own. And there's a real value to that customer experience, right? And so one of the things we see, our clients competing on as we move forward here, is around a better customer experience. I think if you look at industry research, I think Forrester calculated, that the impact of 1 point of a customer experience improvement can drive millions of dollars in additional revenue, right? And so this really is kind of a game changer. And once again, the expectation that customers have developed from their consumer-facing technology use, right? That everything is easy and fast and sort of follows the latest design patterns. They expect that in their business interactions as well. And so there really is a competition landscape around customer experience that we need to be aware of. And sort of the last driving reason we see customers push to modernize is really around their data, right? I think most organizations realize that data-centric companies are some of the largest in the world, right? If you think it's about some of the big tech companies, they are data-first companies. From almost a decade ago, right? Sort of the rise of big data, right? This notion of data being the new oil started to circulate. New Vantage Partners, they're one of the sort of leading Fortune 1000 data survey firms, did their 2021 installment, and they kind of reported out that 92% of companies are accelerating their investments in data and AI. So virtually every customer that they talk to in the Fortune 1000 is spending more money on data, but only 29% are seeing transformational business outcomes. Right. So what is this? This is the same old story about, the 5-year-long multi-million-dollar data warehouse project that in the end got the organization nowhere. Right. And so we have a lot of customers who they have this data. There's great value in this data if they can extract, refine it, interpret it, right, and use it to sort of drive business decisions. But that's the tough part, right? So a lot of companies capture all this data and it's trapped, right? And so you can't take it and aggregate it and use it to make some decisions or some learning. We in fact had a customer in the oil and gas industry who had all sorts of apps and sensors with localized data across various rigs. And theirs was a story that they couldn't aggregate and share that data, right? And so they had all this data, all the sensor data that they couldn't use to sort of make predictive inferences about, repairs and maintenance, right? Because it was all trapped locally on each one of those rigs. And so we helped them sort of modernize that application to be able to take and store that data in a central location that could then be sort of studied and aggregated as well as sort of evaluated. And then, we even engaged our data practice to do some predictive analytics on top of it, right? So certainly data is a big driver. Microsoft has called this the decade of data, and we certainly see that in our customers transitioning to the cloud today. So where do you get started? Right? Maybe you've seen these signs. Maybe you know more than one of those in your own sort of portfolio of applications. So where do you get started? It can be daunting. It can be a lot for organizations to handle. It's not every organization's job to work with customers, about sort of evaluating and planning and affecting sort of large scale migration and modernization efforts to the cloud. That is what Catapult does. It's what we've done for a great many years. This is sort of our cloud methodology that we've built, over nearly a decade, helping customers transition to the Microsoft cloud environment. For those of you in and around cloud technologies, should look, fairly familiar to Microsoft's cloud adoption framework, right? It's, tightly aligned to that. In fact, Catapult was one of the founding partners that helped contribute to the CAF framework. And so, we see this sort of journey with our customers quite frequently, right? And we help them kind of from the beginning, right, when they're trying to understand where they are through a series of, innovation workshops and cloud adoption framework workshops, right, to kind of understand what's possible, what the business drivers are. And then we kind of move through the evaluation of their environment, right, and looking at their app estate and how they might prioritize and think about ranking some of the apps for one of those modernization approaches we talked about earlier, whether it's lift and shift or surgical or kind of sort of greenfield and cloud first net new development. And then, of course, we help our customers, execute that articulated vision through a series of, kind of migration and modernization activities. But if you think about that initial step, right, a lot of organizations jump over sort of that initial planning and evaluation phase, often to their detriment. More than once we've been called in to help customers who you kind of just jumped ahead to try to either adopt or migrate or perhaps build a net new app in the cloud. And there's concerns that there's not stakeholder buy-in. There's usually highly prevalent concerns around security, because obviously you want to ensure that you have good guardrails around your cloud environment so that you are as secure as possible. And that can be tricky for folks. And so that's certainly one we come in to help with. And then kind of, around cost, right? So people just kind of jump into this adoption phase and the bills add up pretty quickly if you're not sort of monitoring that and planning appropriately. And so, can't underscore the importance of that initial planning engagement. And specifically around that, one way Catapult helps our customers is we offer an app modernization assessment. And this is really kind of that step back of looking at your entire application estate, helping you sort of understand what your key sort of business drivers and outcomes are, looking at that estate, cataloging them, helping you make some determinations about sort of the impact of modernization versus the cost of sort of maintaining the current state, right? And we'll help you make some recommendations about which applications might be the right ones to start with and how to start, right? Is it, are you throwing it away and starting net new in the cloud, or are you looking at making some very distinct sort of changes to parts of the app to better modernize and meet the needs of your business? But that's just one of the ways we can help. And, as always, we are always willing to reach out and have a conversation with you and kind of understand your business goals and objectives and the ways that we can help you start to take advantage of some of the really exciting new cloud features we see many of our customers using today. So for that, I'll thank you for your time. I will now turn it back to Shanna. Shanna?
Thank you, Michael. That was a lot of great information. If you would like to speak with a Catapult expert about the application modernization that Michael talked about just a moment ago, or anything else you heard him discuss today, you can click through the QR code on the left-hand side of your screen and get in touch with us. And finally, let us know how we did today. We love feedback. We use it to make these better and better. So if you have just a moment, if you'd click through the QR code on the right-hand side of your screen and let us know how we did. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it and have a good afternoon.